please. Well, on that note, let's go to the second slide. I would like to, anyway, I'm going to read. We have a full agenda today, but before we begin, some of the participants we had planned on today will not be here. A small part of the fallout from the tragic events that took place at Oxford Public Schools in Oakland County this week. Here at the start of our day, let's pause for a moment of silence to remember the victims of this horrible act. Tate Meyer, Madison Baldwin, Hannah St. Juliana, Justin Schilling. The wounded who continue to recover, the families, the students, and educators of Oxford High School, and all of our Michigan students and teachers traumatized by these events. Thank you. Okay, just a reminder, it's your leadership team, Jennifer Clem, Central, and a reminder of our dates. Our next meeting is February 4th. We're looking to do something around core teaching practices on that date. And we'll probably have Mitten join us. And then hopefully that we will be meeting in person in April in Hope College. So we have some DARTEP business and we need to approve the minutes from October. I can add, I don't know, Susan, Brian sent the link out yesterday. They are on the DARTEP website, and then we have the link here.
Sally Ray, so moved.
Sally Ray moves to approve. Do we have a second?
Dr. Lisa Ng, second.
Thank you, Lisa. Any discussion? All those that approve the minutes from October, oh, actually we do the opposite in this situation. So anyone that does not approve the minutes from October, say aye. Okay, minutes approved. Thank you. And the treasurer's report.
Good morning, everybody. This is Beth Fighton from Oakland. Our November balance has gone up because most of the dues have come in. So our current balance at the end of November is $13,242.29. We have 28 institutions fully paid. There were 31 last year. We have one institution partially paid, but they added more members. And so I'm just waiting on the additional payment. One of them is working to get the payment to me, and one of the people that joined in the past has not responded yet. And so we likely will not have the full 31 as we did before. In total, we have 134 paid members, which I think is great. As we said at the last meeting, in order to cut back on our banking fees, we are only going to have a 2-month window with which we will take payments by credit card. Otherwise, we continue to get charged monthly just for having that service open. So that process has now closed. So anyone that still owes dues can pay by check or direct deposit into the account, which some institutions do. They send me a form, I fill it out with banking information, and their offices pay direct. So that's still a possibility. We've been working on our account information and our banking. So we have submitted our filing with the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, or LARA group, for DARTEP to have membership. We were actually somehow seated under Coates. And so Stein was very helpful in getting us removed from Coates. And now we've applied to be on our own. And so we're working on that. Once we get our final paperwork, we are then able to update our bank account information and put our current officers on that account. And one just final reminder that in June, when our contract expires with Merchant Services, we will be looking into other services that provide the same services but lower fees, something perhaps like Square, to help us continue to process dues electronically. So we will be looking into that. Any questions about the Treasurer's report? You can get a hold of me at Oakland University. Thank you.
Okay, we have our organization reports. MACD.
So, hello, everybody.
Beth is here. Yay!
I'm Beth Savitsky, and I'm from.
Oh, so good to see you.
Yeah. And yes, and so we're excited to get going with some important things with MACD. Actually, we had our critical race theory on webinar on October 27th, which I was not able to attend since my accident was October 26th in the evening. But from all reports, it went off amazingly well. And we can't begin to thank the people enough for their work on this, this very important topic. We will be doing a publication based on this webinar, and I will be sure to get that information out once it's available. Second, we are still planning our MACD supported, what are we calling it now? Continuous improvement workshops for the HOPE Accreditation Conference. And good news for everyone to know that the Hayworth Hotel at Hope College has been renovated, although I thought it was beautiful before. I can't imagine what it is now. And so right now we are also looking, starting the planning next week. And so if people would like to send in information that they might want covered, Doug Brescher is also available, and I will put his email to get that information, and I will put his email in the chat for people. And other than that, if there's nothing that anyone else would like to add, we're just very excited about what we've done and what we'll be doing soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth.
Beth, it is so great to see you, and I'm thrilled that you are here and that you are beginning to heal slowly. I know we all have been thinking and praying for you and for a quick healing.
Thank you. I appreciate all the support. It's been amazing.
She's technically not cleared to work yet, so we almost wouldn't let her sign on, but we're glad she's here. Okay, we have Michigan Public Deans. I believe that's
okay.
nice.
I will start, and Marcia, please jump in, or even Joe, if you want to. Try to even remember back that far after this week, to be honest. But looking through the minutes and, the agenda, what the Michigan Public Education Deans managed to do is elect some people to positions, and Marcia Fetters graciously stepped into the role of chair-elect, so she'll be chair next year, or president next year. We looked at MASU updates with Dan and Bob, and that touched on some of the state budget issues and things of that nature. And a good bulk of our time was also spent looking at MDE updates that correspond to the kinds of updates that are often shared here at DARTEP. We concluded with discussion about CAPE changes that Gina and Sean were graciously able to speak to, both those MDE updates and the CAPE changes that we concluded didn't have a great deal of concern or effect on how we're proceeding as institutions in that regard. And lastly, we set forth an agenda for next steps in the next meeting, and Marcia and I are resolving to look at supporting initiatives around students, underrepresented students in teacher prep programs, and in particular, looking at building on some of the work that's done at Western Michigan University and our other, some other colleagues, other universities, or peer institutions, and build a listening tour in as our next meetings focus to learn about practices around building in programs to support students of color, underrepresented students in teacher prep programs. So I'll leave that update there. I don't know, Marcia or Joe, if you want to chime in with anything that I perhaps glaringly missed.
I think that covers most of it. It's also talking about a pipeline from the school, high schools and like that, of underrepresented groups too. So it's not just once they get to campus and providing those support structures, but also the pipeline Zoom.
Yes, and that reminds me, thanks, Marcia, that Sean had talked about some forthcoming announcements relative to pipeline, funds that support pipeline initiatives. And there are many that Dr. Rice talked about through a communication that was subsequent to the Michigan Public Education Dean's Conference. And we've seen those communications, and we await, of course, further detail about how we can engage our districts in availing themselves of those grant dollars so that we can get students into teacher education who are not now represented as completely as they should be. So thanks for that. Anything else, Joe or Marcia, that you'd like to add? I think that's it, Jennifer.
Great, thank you. So we have Michigan Independent Educator Preparation Institutions.
I have no update at this time unless Susan English does, but I do not think we have anything right now to share.
Nope, nothing new. Okay. And then I know Cindy's not an organization report, but Cindy asked for some time to talk about the social emotional learning and share where we are with that. Is Cindy here?
Yes. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate that. It's good to see and be with all of you this morning. It's been a rough week for so many of us. I see a lot of new names on this call. I'm Cindy Carver, and I'm at Oakland University. And I have been trying to organize a group of us over the last year that are looking at the role of teacher preparation in addressing SEL in our schools and preparing our candidates to go and even know what SEL is and be thoughtful contributors to the conversation. Did a survey of our institutions last year, found that there's a lot that we want to do in this area, but we don't have a lot of collective understandings. And there's very little in the literature for us as teacher educators to guide us. So I've been collecting names. A lot of you are part of that. We were going to do a panel with students this fall for those that were interested. However, we had the conference. So I'm part of along with Wendy Burke and a number of other people, are part of the Michigan Social Emotional Learning Alliance. And we hosted a conference. It was actually an in-person conference, although many joined us virtually, and that was at the end of October. And so we decided we would just encourage participation at that. But right now, what I am asking is if anyone is interested in being part of a small network. This is just an ad hoc group of us. It doesn't have to be only people in DARTEP. If there are other people on your campuses that are really interested in social and emotional learning, and not only how do we, there's so many layers to social emotional learning, and this week is bringing so much of that to the fore. How do we make sure we've addressed our own social emotional learning and that we're able to be good models in our classroom for our students? And what are the appropriate ways to bring that into our classrooms? And how do we do that in a way that honors each child's individual identity? So we need to have really strong connections to issues of diversity and equity and inclusion when we're talking about social and emotional learning. And there is, it's big and it's exploding, and it's there's just so little to guide us. So if you want to be part of that group, I'm going to share a Google form right now. And if you would just take a moment and sign up, then you'll be on our mailing list. And that's all I've got. If you have any further questions, please reach out to me independently in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thanks so much. And thanks for, good to see Beth and see her back with us. And thanks for all the support for those of us over here that live and work and love the families and the children in Oxford.
Can I just make one comment about that link that you just sent? I think it needs permission. I just tried to get into it.
Whoops, I'm sorry, Sally Ray. I turned off, I muted myself. I thought I opened it up, so I'll keep working on that and see what I can do. Okay, thank you.
Much.
Yep.
Any other questions for Cindy? Or any of the other organizations? We have a little bit of time before Superintendent Rice is with us.
I can just take 2 seconds and piggyback on that whole SEL piece. What I've found in our local area is that there's an awful lot of administrators and down to educators in the K-12 system who are seeing it as a checkbox that just has to be done. And I think that if we can work with our candidates and get a foundation for them so it's just a norm that they come out with, then they can take into the schools with them. And we're working on it with the principals here locally, with so much more work to do, understood. But to understand that it's the plate that you work from, it's not one more thing to put on their plate, but it is what is their foundation that they start with as an educator. And once we get that, it's kind of like building relationships first. It's that same, one piece of it is that same concept that if we don't build relationships, the kids aren't going to do anything in our classes. And so if you haven't been involved in SEL, I would strongly encourage you guys to be a part of it and see the necessity beyond allowing our teachers to see it as a checkbox. So that's my 2 cents.
Sally Ray, thanks for adding that part, because right now there are so many social emotional learning programs that schools are being encouraged to purchase. And one of our fears is that they're going to use all of these dollars available from COVID dollars to purchase these programs and just layer them on. So it's one more thing. And that's not, it's as was shared in an earlier meeting we had, it's not social emotional learning with a hug. We have to really think hard about what exactly this means. And we need our candidates to be engaging in those conversations and thinking and contributing to the decision-making in the coming years around what it means to really address students' social emotional learning competencies and do it in a way that's respectful to all students.
So Cynthia, Joe Lubig, NMU, I'll keep throwing out a plug then for SEL, multi-tiered systems of support, as we all really try to work within tier 1. As you know, we still have 30 schools in this state that utilize a derogatory nickname and or logo that is against the wishes, the express written wishes of the federally recognized tribes, the National Council of American Indians, the tribal education directors in our state. We still need to keep having those conversations, and please keep doing that. We're asking students to attend school in spaces at the minute they walk through that door. Stop us from doing any of this stuff with them in an authentic way. So just, I'm going to keep bringing it up at every meeting till every one of those is addressed.
Excellent point. There's also a pushback for SEL right now that's coming from a lot of the same groups that are pushing against critical race theory in schools. And so that's another piece that we just have to watch. It's turned into a political issue. And we just have to keep ourselves in the conversation.
That's
I firmly
something that
believe
I was going to raise too, because that is coming up more and more, and talking about the distinctions and like that. It's getting grouped in together and interpreted as the same thing.
So our group was thinking, Wendy Burke and I, and we've been working with Laura Casey, who is running and leading the Social Emotional Learning Alliance at the state level, and thinking the best time for us might be to meet on Friday afternoons after our DARTEP meetings. It makes for a really long day, but it would be a time when many of us have that time to start just gathering on a regular basis. So just putting that out there as a possibility.
I just want to add one thing, which is, and I'm a firm believer in this, and I think that we should be addressing this sort of in an integrated way in our programs. But the issue that faces practicing teachers is that they are, for the most part, not equipped to address this. They don't have the training nor the support in other ways, and so and we depend upon the current teaching core to support our teacher candidates. I mean, it's not only for that reason. We want to support also practicing teachers, right? They are part of our constituency. So I think we need to give some thought to the fact that there are thousands of classroom educators who don't, who have this thrust at them without really deep and significant training.
And so what they do is they go find something even free, not even using their own dollars.
Right.
They find something free and they bring it in and they do it. And I'll go back to that same phrase. They check the box off.
Or if they're mentor teachers, they depend upon our teacher candidates to do it, to take care of it. And I don't mean to be, derogatory or about this, but if I were in that situation, I would do that, just like I would, that if someone had a deeper understanding of educational technology. I mean, it's the same kind of, it's treated in the same way because there is no existing plan for this. Just like because of the incident in Oxford, we now think about active shooter training as a separate thing, where it's really part of the larger issue about sort of how do you recognize student difficulties? How do you deal with these things sort of before, right? There's the acute thing about dealing with this, but there's also sort of how do you help prevent that? And what kind of support do teachers need to develop that kind of knowledge and skills set?
Cynthia, and one of the things that Lauren brings up all the time is the fact that we can't, what does she say? We can't demand what we can't deliver. And so if we don't deal with the adult self-care and treat our college students as the adults in the classrooms, along with their mentor teachers, and start talking about self-care at that level, there's really no purpose. There's no significance to trying to get them to teach their kids about so many of the layers of this critical piece of social emotional learning, that if we don't get it, and therefore our college students don't get it, and they can't, then we get the mentor teachers. The K-12s are almost an offshoot rather than a significant piece. So that to me is a key piece, is that we keep the adults involved as well.
I see that Dr. Rice is on the call, and he is a great advocate for SEL. So perhaps he will have some things to share with us too, and thoughts on our role as teacher educators.
Yes. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for doing
I'll work
this work.
on the link, by the way, and I'll repost it once I get it publishable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as Susan has said, Dr. Rice is with us. So please welcome our state superintendent, Michael F. Rice. Thank you for being here, Dr. Rice. We really appreciate you speaking with us today.
I appreciate being here. It's been a difficult week, and a lot of us are sort of soldiering through it. So if it has affected you, if it has triggered something in you, you know, we understand. A lot of us are going through that right now. I want to welcome you. I want to appreciate the time that I'm going to be spending with you. I want to recognize my MDE team members who are with me today. Sue Carnell, Dr. Sue Carnell, my Chief Deputy Superintendent is here today. And Dr. Sean Kotke and I are going to be doing a tag team PowerPoint. We've cleverly set up distinct roles. I'm going to handle all the easy questions, and he's going to handle all the hard ones this morning. So deans, directors, representatives of teacher ed programs, here we go. 24 quick slides, and then the most important part of this, which is your feedback. All right, let's roll. Okay, so your leadership has really been important in the last year and a half. We appreciate so much the role of our teacher candidates who have jumped in and have done all sorts of things that normally they wouldn't do in the absence of a pre-pandemic, but the times require it, and so we appreciate their flexibility in that regard. It will prepare them well for a career in teaching. Next slide, please. So our state strategic education plan has 8 goals. The top 10 strategic education plan has 8 goals, the 7th of which is to address the teacher shortage. Next slide. So the teacher shortage, of course, is not simply in Michigan, it's across the country, but ours is particularly exacerbated by ugly policy decisions. For example, the decision to underfund public schools. Michigan ranked 50th of 50 in total education revenue growth, inflation adjusted from 1995 to 2015. This is the if you will, the so-called David Arson study with appreciation for Professor Arson for pointing out the lamentable position of Michigan in the funding of public education during that 2-decade period of time. Some people say, well, why are you talking about the history? We're talking about the history because the history affects the current day. That is in the revenue base of every single school district, all 830 of them in the state of Michigan. Next slide, please. So it's important to understand how we got here in order to figure out how we get out of it. The legislature got us here. The legislature underfunded public education most profoundly in 2011 when it didn't flat fund public schools or barely increase funding of public schools, a nominal increase, but a cut relative to inflation. But in 2011, a $470 per kid nominal cut. There were layoffs, pay freezes, reductions, higher class sizes, fewer support staff. And for many districts in the state, there's been no recovery since 2011, or little recovery since 2011. Educators had to pay a greater share of health insurance and retirement costs. The annual evaluation law, which had been passed in 2009, updated in 2011 to include student growth data, including but not limited to state tests, also had an adverse effect on the pipeline. So what happened to our numbers? Next slide, please. This is what happened to our numbers. The young people who were in the profession in 2011, that is to say, who were in the pipeline, who were in your programs, largely continued in your programs. They didn't alter their career path for the most part. They kept going through your programs, but immediately thereafter, the numbers began to plummet. That is to say, the next generation said, not us, not happening. Why? because teachers began to say, this is not the same profession. This is not a profession for you. Our young people could see the cuts. They could see the drying up of opportunities for them, 2011, 12, 13, 14. And as a result, they went into teacher education less frequently. That's not my opinion, although it is, it's the numbers. And though we have built those numbers back up in the last few years, we're still roughly half of what we were 8 years ago. Next slide, please. We're not simply interested in quantity and quality of new teachers. We're also interested in diversity of new teachers. On the top of this slide, you can see the fact that in the state of Michigan, our teachers are 90.8% white, a little bit more than 90% white. Other ethnicities, a little bit more than 9%. Our student body is quite different, however. We're 65% white, more than a third of other ethnicities of color. So our young people are approximately 4 times as likely to be of color as are our teachers. There's research, as you know, deans, directors, representatives of teacher ed programs. There's research that shows that there is a positive effect on seeing yourself in the teaching profession, particularly if you are a child of color, particularly if you are African American. It's not all about diversity, but the fact that it is not all about diversity doesn't mean that it isn't at all about diversity. It is most assuredly in part about diversity in the workforce. Next slide, please. So here's a silver lining piece. Over the last 5 or 6 years, some of you may have seen an article that said that the number of Black or African American teachers in the state had declined. That's true. That number declined from 05 to 15. It's actually increased a fair bit in the last 5 or 6 years. We are actively working to promote programs that can expand the diversity in our workforce. We think that this is important not only as a matter of equity, but also as a matter of engagement for our young people, and ultimately as a matter of student achievement as well. Next slide, please. All right, so Dr. Kotke is going to share school district and department efforts, and then together we're going to share a department plan for reviving the teacher profession. Dr. Kotke.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. If we can go to the next slide, please. Among the several efforts that the school districts and the department have forged are some grow your own efforts, working with current students and or staff. These programs do 2 different things. One, to help support staff become teachers or long-term substitutes. Anybody who's really employed in the school that would like to become part of the teacher workforce based on the needs of the local educators in the school community. And we also have grow your own programs that have been developed, and Holly will talk about that a little bit toward the end of today's meeting when we get to the overall MDE updates for students who have an interest in exploring and becoming teachers. Next slide, thank you. And here that is, Future Proud Michigan Educator Explore programs that provide opportunities for our high school students to engage in hands-on teaching experiences and having supervision and mentoring by experienced educators. We had a $1.1 million Grow Your Own implementation grant that covered 44 school districts. And we will be excited to roll out phase 2 of that set of grants. Next slide, please. We have the Welcome Back Proud Michigan Educator campaign, and there's 2 different wings of this. One is for formerly certified teachers or people whose certificates have lapsed. We sent thousands and thousands of postcards earlier this year to individuals whose certificates had lapsed. Over 1,000 responded, gave us an email address to be contacted by districts. And 161 districts submitted some waiver requests for those educators to about 228 new teachers to get recertified under the waiver criteria. So we allowed them to get through there. We also had the Welcome Back Proud Michigan Educator campaign for currently certified teachers. In October, we sent over 35,000 letters to people with valid certs who are not teaching in a public school. Many of you may have received them. I received one, in fact. Over 1,000 also reached back to us to give an email address to be contacted by districts. And we've had 336 eligible districts participating in this campaign, getting weekly updates, the contact information for people who have agreed to have that shared. In 2020 and then into 2021, the moratorium on new educator preparation programs, particularly for alternative routes, was temporarily lifted, and we reviewed and approved 2 new alternative route programs in the Detroit area, both proposed by school district entities, Detroit Public Schools Community District's On the Rise Academy program and New Paradigm for Education's program. Both of the programs have an explicit focus on increasing the diversity of the teaching workforce, particularly in recruiting African-American males to the teaching workforce. The DPSCD program is a grow your own program, working with the paraeducators, interventionists, and other school support people to get initial teacher certification. 87% of that cohort for the first one is identifies as Black or African American. And New Paradigm for Education is a residency-based program within New Paradigm, their portfolio of schools. And they have 13 teachers in their first cohort, and 12 of them are identified as Black or African American. Thank you. We have 2 different flexibilities in the area of special education that our offices collaborated together on. One is the special education certification flexibility. It allows for placement of individuals with special education endorsements into different across categories. With some limitations based on some rules, but that's allowing our districts to be more flexible in those placements of special education teachers. And we have a social worker credentials flexibility for individuals who are working as who are social workers with a master's in social work. To begin working as school social workers while they complete the coursework, so we can get school social workers into our schools to support our social emotional learning. All right.
So we have we have an outstanding proposal before legislative leaders now to put $300 to $500 million over the next 5 years to recruit and retain requisite numbers of high quality educators for our kids. I want to go through the high points of these. I'm most interested in your reactions to these. Let's go to the next slide. So tuition and other expense reimbursement for current college students who make a commitment to pursue teaching, and by extension, loan forgiveness for current teachers who are working to pay off college loans. The first is obviously a recruitment effort. The second is a retention effort. We're under no illusions that a state legislature that hasn't been in this effort is going to jump in and immerse itself metaphorically, completely. We know that this is going to have to be little by little, and that they're going to have to choose among the menu of ideas that we put forward to them. Nonetheless, we think that this would be a tremendous benefit to reduce the cost, either for those who are beginning their programs or those who are paying off the cost of their programs after they've gone into the profession. After all, young people can begin in the profession $38,000, $40,000 a year and have very significant loans that they have to pay off. If we can relieve some stress on the back end of that, and if we can boost those entry-level salaries, we're going to be better off in the long run in recruiting and retaining staff members for our kids and our kids' schools. So scholarships for high school seniors are important. There are states across the country that have this. We should as well. We want to revive and strengthen the teacher preparation pipeline in the Upper Peninsula and the Northern Lower without disrespect to anything that is going on in the northern portion of the state. The reality is that it is far too dependent upon a strong northern program. And we'd like to strengthen the northern program, but we'd also like to strengthen Lake State. We'd like to see Michigan Tech take its program off pause, if you will. We'd like to see some additional strength up in the northern portion of our state. We believe that we need to better support mentor teachers in our local school districts. We do have a mentoring law. That's terrific. The fact of the matter is we have no such mentoring law for new superintendents and should. No such mentoring law for new principals, and we should. We're glad we have a mentoring law for new teachers, but it needs to be strengthened. It needs to include grants to LEAs for stipends for teacher mentors. There has to be teacher mentor training. There has to be some semblance of floor associated with that mentoring of young teachers. And then finally, we'd like to ease restrictions on accepting licenses from out of state. A lot of people are under the illusion that there is no reciprocity. Not true. In fact, 27% of all certificates granted in 1920, 1,160 of them were from out of state. That's good news in a state that's struggling with a teacher shortage. But we think that we can offer greater flexibility as well. And we're pursuing that in partnership with a number of our legislative leaders right now. Dr. Kotke, to you.
Great, thank you. We're very interested in supporting entry into the profession of people who completed prep programs but did not obtain a credential. It's a fairly common email that my team gets of somebody who graduated X number of years ago and would like to get certified, that they never got their certificate here in Michigan, or they were able to work without a certificate. And we would like to be able to allocate some funds and technical assistance to help those individuals have an expedited path to get that certificate and finish the job in their preparation. Looking to expand eligibility for the child development and care reimbursements that are offered through both jointly through our department and Department of Health and Human Services to encompass individuals who are enrolled in teacher preparation programs. As we know, if we're enticing people from other careers, that childcare is a major concern. And if we're going to put students first in all of our work, we need to be very intentional in this kind of a strategy. And then looking to some tuition reimbursement for the reading diagnostics coursework so that individuals can grow in their profession. And that is still required, of course, in law. And that to support both our children with literacy and to reward that professional learning and advancement of our teachers. Looking to additional grants for districts to develop programs for students in K-12 who have an interest in teaching. So expanding on the work of the Future Proud Michigan Educator program. And stipends, student teacher stipends to defray those living costs during the student teaching experience. I know in several of the questions that you posed prior to this meeting, there was a lot of interest in stipends, and that is absolutely on our radar.
So now the important part of the meeting. Your thoughts, your questions. Talk to us.
Well, I have Hi, this is Gail Richmond. I'm the Director of Teacher Preparation Programs for Michigan State University. And so thank you very much for the presentation to both of you. These are all things, and some of which I've read about in the press releases and such, but I guess I have just sort of a flat question, which is how likely do you think in the present climate, any of these initiatives which require significant financial investment by the state are likely to be funded in the foreseeable future?
So I think it's a really good question. What I would suggest is this, that we are not observers in response to that question. We are participants in response to that question. And to the extent that we are substantial participants, the likelihood of success is greater. To the extent that we sit and watch it as if we were part of an audience or as if we were spectators, the likelihood is diminished. So if we put our shoulders, individual and collective, into this, I think there is a substantial likelihood that there will be significant dollars that will be accorded for recruitment and retention of teachers for a few reasons. One, unlike 2.5 years ago when I began in this position, there is a much greater consciousness of the teacher shortage and a much greater acknowledgement of the teacher shortage. So that's number one. The problem is acknowledged. The problem is defined. There's not an argument about the problem. That's one. Two, there is substantial wherewithal with which to deal with this problem. The state has several $billion of unspent and unappropriated federal pandemic relief funds, which may be used for this purpose, number one. It has several $billion of state revenue, which were unanticipated, number two. And number three, people are hammering the state legislature about this issue. Now, whether or not there's a clear understanding that the legislature is both the problem and the solution is a question. I point out the history because I think that it's important to know how we got to a particular place, in part to help us get out of it, but also in part to make clear that you deteriorated this profession. You chipped away at this profession. You have a responsibility to help rebuild it. And I want to put the onus on that institution. Now you can say, well, it's term limited, Michael. A lot of these people didn't have anything to do with that. I'm not blaming individual human beings. That's not my point at all. Mine is the collective. The legislature helped undermine public education in this state, and profoundly so, over at least a decade period of time. And one would argue, David Arson would argue, for example, over a quarter of a century. By the way, I'm not arguing with David. I'm simply saying that irrespective of what period you choose, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, I don't think you can argue the point. The underfunding by itself was a deterioration of the profession. And now the legislature has a chance to begin to correct the errors that it made. So I would say if you, plural, and we, plural, we is a plural, but if you, plural, lean into it with us, I think the likelihood is high.
So, Dr. Rice, Joe Lubig, NMU.
Hi there, Dean. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's Friday. We made it. So,
amen.
60 administrators on campus interviewing our candidates. I think it's going to be a feeding frenzy here for who's going to get who to hire. So we're starting the process to work with our legislative liaison on campus to start reaching out to our UP representatives. So the materials you've been putting out are super helpful. So we're just building and extending that conversation. One of the things that I worry about, and I've talked to Sean a little bit about it, is how the legislature decides to, so see how positive I'm being, how they decide to release these funds. My concern is that they like competition, and if these go to competitive grants for LEAs or ISDs in higher ed prep isn't included as somebody who can write for these grant, if they go the grant route, then we're X'd out. And it just seems that I know up here in Northern Michigan, we have collectively 3 grant writers across the whole UP. And then if it's the LEAs writing for these, I'm back to managing potentially 47 individual plans to help people get licensed. And that's part of the problem right now, is with all the exceptions we've been able to make working with MDE and working with all the locals, it's exhausting. And it's a crisis for me because it's really difficult to track those data and just to put resources into it. So that's my plea. So maybe I'm off base, I hope, but I worry about how the legislature would want to get these funds available to people.
Right. So it is a little bit of a goat rodeo. I acknowledge that. In Ohio, where I'm from, it's a donkey basketball game. But you know, you have to adjust culturally when you. So I've been in Michigan for 17 years, and so I've learned to change my cultural references. So it is a little bit of a challenge. I get that. Some of this would go directly to individuals if allocated, tuition reimbursement, for example. Although I think that probably more efficiently would go to institutions for individuals. One way or the other, I don't think it's related to grant writing. The same is true for loan forgiveness. The same is true for reciprocity. I do think when we talk about the revivification of the teacher pipeline up north, I do think that is that it is possible that the legislature would go a grant writing route. I would hope that it wouldn't. I would hope that it would simply give particular dollars to particular institutions and say these dollars are for these purposes, among others, for blank, 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 but not limited to those elements. That would be my druthers. I will tell you that sometimes we're involved in the front end of this stuff. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're chasing it and sometimes we're leading it. Mostly we're chasing it. But in this particular case, we've put out the ideas publicly. And so it will be harder to ignore us on the back end. The other thing that I will say, Dean, is that we have 2 state senators from the UP who I think are really outstanding representatives. You've got Senator McBroom and Senator Schmidt. We met again with Senator Schmidt this week. I was actually in a committee meeting testifying with him chairing yesterday, not on teacher shortage, on literacy, but teacher shortage, which touched on at the end of the hearing. He's all about getting something accomplished in this teacher shortage space, and I've not seen him be disingenuous. If he doesn't agree on something, he'll say, you know, Superintendent, you need to find another home for that. That's not us. And I appreciate that. So you don't bark up the same tree over and over and over again. So I think we have a pretty good chance to the initial question. I think we have a pretty good chance of getting something accomplished. And I think we have a pretty good chance of getting it accomplished efficiently. I will say one other thing associated with your question though, that years ago, I approached Kellogg about an idea. And I said much the same thing that you said, that I don't have much grant writing capacity. I've got ideas and I've got the ability to implement, but I don't have a lot of grant writing capacity. And the head of Kellogg at the time, Sterling Sparron, connected me with some funds, gave me some money to access grant writing, to apply for a larger grant from Kellogg. He gave me money to get more money from Kellogg, in a sense, if you will. He got me grant writing capacity. And if need be, we can figure that out. I think there are a lot of ways to skin a cat. Okay. Más preguntas, more questions.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Rice. Carl Stucco, I'm the Director of Clinical Experiences here at SVSU. I'm glad that you're addressing the shortage of teachers in Northern Michigan. We have actually quite a few student teachers in that area, especially with our alternatives certification and residency program. So I'm glad that you're addressing that. I know I deal with many phone calls from principals looking for teachers, and sometimes we're able to help and sometimes we're not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There are going to be people lower in the state who aren't as appreciative. So, but it's a special challenge up north, and I think we need to acknowledge that it's a special challenge. I think the other thing that we have to do is to acknowledge that all 1.4+ million children in the state are ours without exception, and that we ought not to be about the most densely populated portions of the state. I'm an urban educator. I have been my entire life. But I believe about all kids, not about some, as do all of you. More questions?
Cindy, you had your hand up. Did you want to take it back? I don't want to put you on the spot. I just didn't want you to.
No, I'm trying to formulate the question because Dr. Rice, I am so with you. I think we need to individually exercise every opportunity we have to push these agenda items that you've laid out that are ambitious, but so important. And we need to collectively organize ourselves because but we're not used to doing that. And I'm wondering where our priorities are I think one is the Dean's Council. You might have other resources. We have lobbyists with most of our universities. We've got to get them working. So Joe, I'm impressed that you've been able to make that happen. But within this organization of DARTEP, how do we do this? Do we hire someone? Do we need to set priorities? How can we be the most helpful and make the most of our collective capacity here?
Right. So I think it's a really good question. You know, when I used to talk to teachers, I had a teacher advisory council for 17 years as a local superintendent, first in Clifton, New Jersey, then in Kalamazoo. And I always told teachers, I said, you know, I know you didn't get into this to get into politics. I get that. But education is affected by politics every single solitary day. Whether you teach 18 kids or 30 kids in your first grade classroom, that's a function of politics. And you've got to be about it, not because you got into it to be about politics, but because in order to support and defend and protect and educate your children, you have to fight or be a part of the good fight in a political context that affects your educational context. So that's one piece. The second piece is that you can begin with a letter from this group with all of the signatories to all of the members of the legislature. And it can be as simple as, we are in receipt of the letter that the state superintendent sent to legislative leaders on such a date. We appreciate that this is a broad menu of possibilities for consideration of the legislature. And we think that these are worthy ideas for consideration to begin to improve the teaching profession. That's not to say that you have to lean in on the narrow strokes. I wouldn't lean in on the narrow strokes right now. Frankly, I'm not leaning in on the narrow strokes. I'm just saying, dudes, here's a menu, okay? We're hungry, eat, okay? We can have the conversation about whether it's tuna salad or grilled cheese or hamburger, you know, in the next few months. But choose something, choose some things off the menu. So that's the beginning. The beginning to me is getting your group behind a series of initiatives for consideration, not narrow stroke, broad stroke. So that's one. Two, I would ask you to make it not open-ended, but closed-ended. You are asking for movement by the beginning of spring, and put a date on it, whether it's March 20th or March 21st. I always get the whole spring thing confused. Someone in the audience is saying, really, seriously, we have a state superintendent who doesn't know a calendar? Yes, we do. You'll figure that out, whether it's March 20th or March 21st. Why the importance? The importance is because if we get it done in the winter, prior to the beginning of spring, we can affect next school year. If, on the other hand, this gets woven into, folded into the next state budget, passed in June, July, or August for the fiscal year 23 budget, we will start flat-footed for next school year. We will not be able to affect next school year. That's the argument. Get it done prior to the beginning of spring, number one. Choose some of these strong ideas, number two. Benefit from the wisdom of the signatories, many of whom are constituents of yours, legislators, in your various districts, number three. That's the letter that I would say should begin it. And then you feather out from there. I do think that there's a power to accessing the lobbyists in the different universities and. But start by getting a commitment of this group. See if you can do that. That will be interesting in and of itself. Because once I get off the line, the real conversation starts. Who's next? Dr. Linda Hicks, very good to see you. My former urban school superintendent colleague.
Good morning. It's always great to see you.
And I believe I'm going to be with you in a couple weeks, if I recall correctly.
You are. We're very excited, and thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. Who's next?
Dr. Rice, this is Susan English from Aquinas. Hi, I'm from Aquinas College here in Grand Rapids. One of the suggestions for legislative proposal that you mentioned that piqued my interest was about mentor teachers and mentoring of novice teachers. It's something that we are experimenting with now, but struggle because of funding. And that is to bridge the gap between pre-service and in-service. We call it STAY, Sustaining Teachers and Youth. And we take our field supervisors who mentored teachers during their student teaching internship and then make them available during their first year of teaching in the field. We have to be very careful because we don't want to step on the toes of the school district or building who is technically responsible for doing that mentoring. But these are, we find that we lose control, we don't lose control, we lose influence when they leave our building and go into a district and everything that we've worked on to teach them might be contradicted by the environment in the school that they're in. So at any rate, we're looking to try to support our new teachers, support our school district partners by bridging that gap between the two and somehow offering mentoring in collaboration with our school partners.
I think that's a great idea. I also think it can provide reflections and considerations for local school districts about how they do this. We don't do this well, as a rule. I see Dr. Marcia Fetters on the line. She's a pro at really nurturing math and science teachers, particularly, or aspiring math and science teachers and new math and science teachers. But, you know, you really do have to shelter them in a fashion. And I don't mean that in a patronizing or condescending way. I just mean that in the sense that, you know, what you're capable of as a 10-year veteran is very different than what you're capable of as a 10-minute veteran. And you know, you get these puppy teachers, and again, I don't mean it to be pejorative or condescending or patronizing, but you know, you're a new teacher. You're struggling with everything. Every solitary thing is new. And oh, by the way, you may be in a school whose children are from a very different culture or set of cultures than you're familiar with. So you, in a sense, are learning a language as you are learning a profession. You're learning a culture. Very, very hard for our young people. And what they are capable of early is very different from what they're capable of a few years later. You hope to shelter them and nurture them in such a fashion that they're able to get to a few years later. Because of course, so many of our young people, they leave the profession frustrated early, not because of an incapacity, but because of context that doesn't permit their nurturing and their growth and their maturing.
Right, right. Those are really tough transitions. And so we recognize that and the other piece of it is that when a novice teacher is in a new school building, it's difficult to be totally honest and reflective with your assigned mentor because there's a lot at stake there. Whereas when we send in and we get permission to send in their previous field supervisor for when they were student teachers, they can spill their guts and it's a different type of mentorship relationship, but it's very difficult for us to finance that because we're no longer getting money from them. They're not paying us tuition. They're not paying field supervisors. So that's where I think if there was some funding support from the state that would even do some piloting of that kind of a collaborative mentorship, we'd be interested in that.
Send me an email on it, please. ricem6@michigan.gov. I'm the 6th Michael Rice in Michigan state government. There were 5 before me. There's 6 after me. That's how unique I am. I think it's a really good idea. I think it's a very important idea. I do think that you can have relationships with district mentors that are very good, that are very open. Typically, those mentors are part of the same union, and part of the union contract is that there can be no supervisory or evaluative component to the work. So that ends up helping those relationships. It doesn't make them perfect. There isn't the distance that you have. There also isn't the longevity of relationship that you have. I mean, you've had them for 4 years, and now you're carrying them again for a 5th year in a fashion. But that does help that they don't supervise. It does help that they don't evaluate. Other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Other questions? Or I can simply get off the line and let the real conversation begin. You could ask a really hard question and see what Dr. Kotke does with it.
They are skilled in that.
I want to be clear that this was not meant to be a waterfront list. It also wasn't meant to be concrete. It was meant to exhibit the substantial nature of the issue, the urgency of the issue, the need to pour money into the issue. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that if the legislature were to fund 5 or 6 of these elements and didn't fund others, I wouldn't be unhappy about that at all. I don't see this as choosing everything. I see this as getting more deeply involved. Remember, the legislature was not into this world until a year and a half ago, until the summer of 2020, when it put $5 million in for so-called retention bonuses for new teachers, little itty bitty portions of money, but portions of money that were important to new teachers who weren't making a whole lot of money. And then this last budget cycle, this last summer, $1.67 million to the department for Grow Your Own programs, a pittance of what we need for Grow Your Own. So I share that with you because we really need them to up their game. They need to come in with 9 figures of support in some way, shape, or form for us. So to the earlier very good question from Cynthia Carver, you know, how can we ... The answer is, if you would put together a letter of support to legislators, and we'd be happy to work with you on that. In fairness, you don't have the letter, so it's hard to say you've seen it. But you could get the letter soon. In fact, if someone on this call were to say, gee, we'd really like to see that letter that you wrote to legislative leaders, we would be, oh, well, there you go. Catherine Durkin said, I'd like to see that letter. So Dr. Sean Kotke will be sharing with you a copy of that, that letter. It only went to legislative leaders. In the next couple of days, we will be sending it to the entire state legislature because we got a request for it at our literacy hearing yesterday. So we're going to be feathering that out from 12 leaders to 148 leaders in the next few days. So if you were inclined to send a letter, I wouldn't send that letter until we sent ours to the entire state legislature, which I anticipate will be Monday or Tuesday of next week. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. You have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So all our panelists are here. So just a little bit of framing before we discuss. I want it to be an open conversation. I want us to be able to talk with our partners and share ideas. I'm encouraging us to focus on solutions. I think we're aware of the problems. And so I just want us to have a good conversation. I know they have a lot of things to share with us. I know that there are many institutions doing great things in some of these areas already. I think this is a good time for us to hear from each other and then also to hear what our partners need and what we can do about it. Next slide. Yep, Cindy, let's take action. So I'm going to ask we have a couple of our partners that were unable to make it. Pamela English and Stephanie Delmage obviously are having impacts from the shooting, so they are not going to be with us today. But everyone else looks like they are on the call. So if they wouldn't mind introducing themselves, that would be great. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Kempinen. I'm the principal at Graveret Elementary School here in Marquette, Michigan. And it's an honor to be with all of you. And my heart goes out to everybody at Oxford. It's just awful. So looking forward to our conversation. And thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Dr. Rice.
Thank you. Mark.
My name is Mark Abenth. I'm a K-2 principal in the Saginaw Township Community Schools, building of about 600. And I'm pretty excited about what I just heard. I didn't know if I had enough standing to unmute and ask questions, so I just listened. But I'm excited about this conversation as well.
Great, thank you for being here. And Dee.
Hi, I'm Dee Yarger. I'm the principal at Farwell High School, which is an 812 building and a self-enclosed early college program. And I also have a separate building in alternative ed, Timberland Alternative Ed, which is an 812 building. So principal of both. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And Blake.
Hi, I'm Blake Pruitt, currently superintendent in Lakeview Schools, Battle Creek, but January 1st will be starting as Newaygo RESA superintendent. So we're about 4,000 students. So 4 elementaries, middle school, high school, and have been running a unique program with Western Michigan, and happy to be here and learn from everybody.
Thank you. And Mike.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Mike Van Camp, Associate Executive Director at the Metro Bureau. We work with primarily schools in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County, member districts. Wayne State, Oakland University are both member districts for us, just as we create partnerships, support, networking, professional development. And then specifically, I work with the HR folks in the Tri-County area, providing that support and attending their meetings and listening to them as they discuss what your topic is today. And then just as an aside, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I also work for CMU in Oakland supervising student teachers, and I dig that. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Welcome. Just real quick, Brian, if you just put up the next slide, and then I'm just going to open the conversation. I'm not trying to control the conversation, but just to briefly, I think we all know some of the issues, and I tried to frame our conversation based on talking to our partners and talking to our conversations here at DARTEP and just everything we're hearing. So I think we all know there's concerns about public perception and recruitment. So I kind of categorized, we'll start the discussion there. I think teachers are feeling unappreciated. I think we're having issues with school board. We're having violence, curriculum, pushback. We all know our candidates are being told to not go into teaching. So those kind of issues. So even just getting candidates to be willing to major in education, we know is an issue. District hiring shortages and student teachers. I went ahead and put the student teachers with district hiring shortages because I believe they're just gonna, those conversations are gonna merge. We know special education is an issue. We know specials is becoming an issue. This is something we just talked about with our partners, that the more that we can't afford to run our art business, all of the Spanish, because our enrollments are low, and then districts need to meet those high school requirements and they're struggling to find those teachers. And then teachers leaving in the middle of the year, obviously moving from district to district. And it's been a real challenge on rural schools when that happens. Programs for career changers, you know, what are we doing for those that want to come back that already have a bachelor's? And then obviously having issues with substitute teaching and substitute teachers. And then how do student teachers fit into all of that? So having that discussion of, I know we're struggling in higher ed, of how much you let student teachers fill classrooms, and how much we kind of still have a traditional student teaching. And then retention and work-life balance. We have more and more younger teachers leaving the field. And so why is that happening? What can we do about that? And I know we've started this conversation about mentoring. Teacher candidates, we have several that start teaching and then leave and move to different fields and change majors. Another concern that all our districts have reported is they're really concerned about how many teachers are going to retire soon, which is going to exacerbate. And then additional duties that schools have to do, and all the social emotional needs that are surrounding. So I kind of divided it in categories. We don't have to just kind of frame the conversation and start the conversation. If we could, we'll start with education, public perception, and recruitment, and kind of what we're doing about that right now. Brian, I think we can pull out of the slides so that we can see each other. And some things that I know we're doing, like MDE is doing the Proud Michigan Educator initiatives. And then we've just heard Dr. Rice talking about tuition reimbursements, loan forgiveness, and those kind of strategies. And so I just want to start the conversation there. What are we doing? And just start the topic around that. Don't know if anyone wants to start, or if our partners would like to start sharing there.
I'll start. Just from a K-12 perspective, yes, I mean, absolutely, everyone is burnt out, and you know, today we had 16 uncovered subs in the district. So, and I've been subbing, you know, everyone in central office has been subbing. So we know that just exacerbates the situation. And we know that, you know, districts have closed for days due to that. So trying to figure out how to work on staff wellness, but even working on wellness, we just need to find people to help support. You know, we're in an arms race in terms of raising rates for subs. One of our local districts has raised their long-term sub to 200 a day, which, I mean, all of a sudden now we're all competing with each other on that. So I don't know the answer in terms of trying to find subs or trying to find different ways to get coverage in the building. But that if teachers could just merely get their preps back and have some time, that would be huge. So we're trying to find new ways to do that, but haven't been successful yet.
I think a large part of the perception of education is with the educators that we currently have in the field. Word of mouth is always the best way to portray our educational field. And with that, I think it's important, and some of the things that we do here at Farwell is try to keep the culture and climate positive. We're doing more gatherings, more get-togethers, more functions, soup walks and PT staff meetings prior, the fun type of things. And Halloween gathering, we're under construction bond. So we all come together and we put our caps on for the construction bond and our yellow. There's a lot with culture and climate and education that is so easy to feed into with the negativity, especially for leaders with multiple balls in the air. And I think part of our job is to umbrella those that are currently working in the field so that they walk out still feeling valued and important and happy in the profession, so that the word of mouth is there. So it's a lot of hard work to keep everybody feeling that. But honestly, they're some of the best sales people we have for the educational field. They're doing the pre-student teachers. They're doing the host student teachers. They're talking in the communities that we live in. They're doing the grow your own programs. They're doing the mentoring in our buildings and our districts. I think they're our best sales force, but there's a tremendous workload for them right now. And to try to minimize that as best as possible is important.
And Dee just made me think of a couple things. Teachers being trauma informed. We're finding that we've trained every teacher with Star Commonwealth during the pandemic when we were shut down. That's helped a ton, both personally for teachers and also to know how to work with kids in trauma. But are our new teachers coming out of college? What sort of trauma training are they getting? What are they ready for? There's plenty of good programs, as well as cultural responsiveness. Those are areas that we're finding when new teachers come to us, they're just deer in the headlights, and that causes them a lot of times to leave. So on that end, having the college help of making sure that teachers are actually ready for the environment they're going to be put into would be huge.
I can totally echo that. I teach adjunct at Saginaw Valley, and I teach the class that covers those types of topics, which was never available to me in the 90s when I was coming out. And what I'm loving, you talk about perception versus reality. The perception may be that teaching is not rewarding, teaching is not paying you enough, teachers are getting abused in the media. But the earlier we can get, and I guess I'm talking to all of us right now, the earlier we can get our prep teachers into meaningful field work, I'll be honest, there's a high, and I remember it when I was a new teacher, there's a high you get when you reach a kid and when you teach them something and when you help them driving away from the school. And getting our pre-service teachers into meaningful field work earlier than student teaching gets them addicted to that feeling. And then when they go back out to their friends and their families outside of the school, they push back a little bit against that feeling of, you're going into teaching, well, why wouldn't you want to make more money somewhere else? So I think, and I'm starting to see that in the last 5-10 years, where there's earlier fieldwork experience and better mentorship that we're giving these new people coming in.
I couldn't agree more with Mark, and also Dee, I'm really grateful for your culture and climate comments. Here in Marquette, and I'm a K-5 building, we have a tremendous relationship with Northern Michigan University School of Education. I know Joe Lubig's in on this somewhere amongst all of us. And the methods classes 3 methods classes actually have a dedicated room in our building on our 3rd floor and meet here. And so, Mark, as you were saying, getting them into the field as early as possible. I mean, they come to our building for their coursework, which they are so fired up and excited to be in this building and experience this teaching and what it's all about. And so I agree, Mark. I think the sooner we can get them in, even if you could get them in their freshman year for some purpose, because this business is all about kids, and they will fall in love with kids, the ones who we want to continue and become teachers. And like you said, Mark, there's nothing greater than knowing that you've made a difference in a child's life, and you've helped them have that moment, whatever that moment is.
Right.
But if Dee was saying, the culture and the climate is so vital now, especially since there's so much out there, and I try not even to worry about what's out there. But I think we have to be keepers of the culture, and we have to be keepers of the climate, and we must consciously and purposefully do that. And here in our building, we have a culture and climate committee. And this year especially, because I think we were all coming back thinking, oh yeah, we made it. We're through, but here we go again, right? And so we have bi-monthly events, and they may be potlucks, or, you know, our favorite is dip day, when everybody brings their favorite dip, and we have that in the teachers lounge, and we all gain 20 pounds after that day of dip. Or something as silly as just everybody writes a positive note to someone in our building, kids, teachers, staff. Just, we have the calendar planned out, and we are purposefully, mindfully upholding the culture and the climate here, because we have to. Because if we don't do it for ourselves here in our building, who's going to do it for us? I'd love to say the world will. And I think there was a great appreciation for us after March 2020. However, to sustain and help uphold our staff, everybody, every single body, our bus drivers, our custodians, our aides, our kitchen workers, even our principals. That's very vital. And when our teachers are feeling good and our staff is feeling good about what's going on here, it helps perception out there.
I agree. We host, well, I agree with your culture climate. That's the most active committee in my building as well. And all the things you're describing, and every school has a list of things they're doing as well. We host, like you talked about, we host 3 courses on campus for Saginaw Valley. And so those students are in my building once a week, and in some cases twice, because they're enrolled in multiple classes. They see those dip days, and they see, you know, I learned the hard or the easy way that if you buy a $19 phone charger and put it on the table in the lounge, it's like they won $1 million. Just little things that lighten the load, bring out some smiles. And then Saginaw Valley's, you know, 19, 20-year-olds are seeing that. And then that's the perception they get. They see the reality, and they can help break down that perception after the bell rings.
I'd like to remind everybody on the call something that is just really simple and easy to do. With the events that happened this week, most of the people on the call know that we've been running a mentor program at Hope College for the last several years, where I connect and stay connected with our graduates. After the events this week, it was as simple as sending a group text to my mentors, my mentees, simply saying, "How are you?" And quite often, just that quick little reminder of somebody is caring about you. These are first-year teachers in the field, all over the state of Michigan. And regardless of how close you were to the events in Oxford, just a quick little, "How are you doing today? I'm concerned about you." And the wave of emotion, the wave of concern, the wave of this is out of control, and I don't know what to do, and just to be able to process that and talk that was absolutely huge this week. So it reminds us all just to be human, with all of us, you know, and I'd like to ask the question of the group, how you guys doing today? Because I think that's really, really important.
I'm going to offer one more thing, and then I promise I'll stop talking.
No, we don't want you to stop talking.
Just to go off of what you just said, your picture just disappeared, but the gentleman from Hope, to go off of what he just said about how it just that simple text. And there's a couple Saginaw Valley people on the call, so if I get in trouble for this, I apologize. But my course that I teach ends next week, and I'm assuming by now you've seen the Amazon commercial that's out about the young people being affected by the pandemic, and the girl gets the bird seed and it makes everyone cry. I don't know if you've seen that ad yet, but it's all over the media. What I did is, we're not face-to-face right now, so we have to be remote. I am leaving a little bag for all of my students that I teach at night. And what I've done is I put the QR code for that ad, and I'm just giving them a little message from me that says, you know, I know this is tough for you right now, and you matter, and I know this is hard for you, and you're kind of the invisible group in this pandemic because everyone thinks you've got everything together and you're cool. And then just letting them know that, you know, it's not an individual sport going in education, and that I'll be there if they have questions going forward, if there's anything they need after they leave my care. And it's hokey as heck, but I'm just giving them a little bird feeder and some seed and a QR code to that ad. So if you're from Saginaw Valley and I'm not supposed to do that, just please don't tell anyone.
Oh, that's nice. We do have a question. So I'd be curious to hear what our panelists think of collaborative mentoring of novice teachers with EPPs. Is that unrealistic? Would it make things harder for school districts? Pros, cons. So basically, if we partnered on mentoring new teachers.
Like, so to clarify, as in mentoring from the college or university with the school district, that's the question, right?
Right. I think it's mentoring new teachers, and so the university would assist you in that. Is that, Susan, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it could take a variety of things. Like what Doug is doing is exactly along those lines, what other people are trying and talking about. I'm just wondering how school districts feel about that. I think part of our need is recognizing that we need to bridge that gap a little better, we collectively, between pre-service, handing off to in-service. How do we best support brand new teachers that first year?
Well, I think go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think it depends honestly on sometimes the size of the school district and the capacity of the school district. Some school districts have very robust new teacher programs, and some smaller districts have none or very little. You know, everyone's required to have a mentor, but what those mentors do is debatable district to district. So I think some of it could be at an ISD or RESA with a local university, and some can be within districts, but I don't think that they're as a consistent. But it is something that I think a university or college could offer that then districts could look at partnering.
Can I jump in on that real quick? So I surveyed all the HR folks in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, knowing I was coming on here today. And an Oakland County district responded with, and this is somewhat related, and I don't mean to take us off on another topic, but that administrators are spread so thin in our buildings that they cannot attend to proper coaching, proper evaluations, making sure people are mentored properly. And their push was, if we could increase funding to help our school administrators properly coach, have professional development, do good evaluations. So my suggestion is, if you could even reach out to your local ISDs, RISAs near you, maybe try to get on an agenda for one of those HR meetings and listen to them near you. You might be able to adapt and say, how can we support you with your mentoring programs, right? To keep it specific to that. Or maybe there's some other partnerships that would deal with this issue and then help us with recruitment and retention.
I know we worked with MSU K-12 outreach. And so they actually worked with our instructional coaches to help teach them how to coach. Now, I will say again, the struggle right now is that all our instructional coaches are subbing 2-3 times a week. So they're not getting out to coach, even though that's their job. So the first piece is training them that they know what coaching is, and then actually being able to get people out to coach is just the struggle we're facing.
I think this is a problem that exists across roles. It's a problem for teachers. As long as their schedule is already 120% filled, then asking them to do one more thing feels like they're, it's getting pressurized. The same is true for administrators. I would argue for some of us at the university, the same is true for university educators. So I think we're all feeling this sort of, in some ways it feels like one of those bone corsets that, women used to wear. I feel like it's getting tighter and tighter. But it's not because I've had this lovely food to eat. I mean, in some cases it is, you want to do all these things, but there's just so much. So I think Blake's point about it being a two-pronged issue. One is the developing the expertise and capacity, but the other, and developing the expertise and then developing the capacity to, which includes providing the time, the supported time, not just doing it on your own time, but supported time, which means if you can't do all of your own list because you're engaged in coaching or mentoring, for example, somebody else has to be hired to take up the slack. So how do we do that in a system that doesn't get those funds typically to, and where those problems are not always recognized?
And that was the direction from the school district in Oakland County that I referenced, is everything schools have been dealing with the last 18 months or so, right? And in addition to what is already on your job responsibilities list, the PD, the mentoring, the coach, that really high leverage stuff that we should be doing as instructional leaders, oftentimes, is hurt. And then it comes down to funding, right? There's nothing that is a surprise to any of it. Dr. Rice outlined it perfectly. It's funding. And it's probably the same in higher ed as it is in K-12. I'm no expert in that. So those lobbying efforts that we heard about and making sure that we're joining up with the lobbyists at the ISDs, that we're having common messages, whether it's to help defer expenses, that's part of a recruiting. How do we make it more attractive, lower the cost, debt relief? I've heard from folks and I could be wrong, teaching isn't as attractive because I have to go pay for student teaching. It costs me a lot of money. And I saw that on one of the slides and part of that proposal. Once again, I know I'm not saying anything that's new, but I want to report back and say that I mentioned the things that I heard. But we need to be active and give that message out. And we need to be consistent in what we say.
We're using semesters money, and we used general fund before to pay our student teachers from Western Michigan because we're about 20 miles from Western. And the problem is that they didn't have gas money to get to us. So my son was an engineering major, and he left college with $20,000 in the bank from his co-ops. Our teachers leave, college with, $20,000 debt, if not far more. So how do we try and at least offset some of the costs that they're doing? And that's where the money can help. But I will also say that we have to use the money to recruit people into education, not just continue to pay the people that are there, because you can give them as much money as they want. If they burn out, the money doesn't matter.
Dara, I like Sarah Kempinen, Graveret, Joe Lubig, NMU. I like that we've been able to build post-graduation an online mentoring course with our alums, so wherever they're at on the planet. And we only have a couple right now from Sarah's school that are in there, but it's been nice to keep those graduating cohorts of student teachers together in spaces for mentoring. So we're trying to leverage the part of the law. We haven't formalized this with the ISDs, right, in the schools, but it allows for university faculty to serve as mentors. And so, so we're still being that guide on the side and holding that together with using some of the same tools and instruments that we use throughout their profession, and then development, and then asking for some of the tools they're using in their current school, which is really nice. But it took, we've talked about this a little bit before, but what it took was getting that funded. So we were able to get our vice president for finance and our provost to sign off on we're going to fund it. And the only thing I can't pay for is the online fee, which is $50 a semester for them. But it's giving us great insight for 15 to 20 graduates every semester to bring them in for a year to stay connected, to know if what we're doing made sense to what they're now being asked to do. And then more importantly, giving them a safe space to vent and to problem solve where they don't feel like they're being judged, right? And that's been really beneficial to us. But for the couple that are in Sarah's school right now, that's been great because it's just an extension of all the methods in student teaching that they've done, right, within that same culture. So, but getting the tuition forgiven, and again, we're all different in our institutions, but there's got to be funding out there. And when we were at Hope College a few years ago, the superintendents that showed up, that Doug and others got organized, they said, ask for that money early, come to us with a plan, because we might be able to write it into our professional development plans and access title funds in order to do those types of things. So that, again, may be an option. I don't know.
I saw a comment in the chat about the core standards. And it says, I wonder what our colleagues think of that. I can attest, I was part of a committee way before COVID, if you can think back that far, where we were talking about the new banding, and I was presented with that list of, I believe it's 17 core teaching, and I checked them off. 5 of them I never even encountered in my teacher prep myself. And the fact that all of you have swung to that type of a world, you know, we talk about funding, and I'm not ever going to be a superintendent. I am not political by any means. There's a lot of stuff you can do just for free to make this better. And I think doing things like talking to students about trauma and ACEs and wellness, and, you know, when I came out, it was more like the Hunger Games with teachers, where it was, my data has to be better than your data so that I can stay on my job and you get fired. And now I can teach a teacher how to do a running record. I can teach a teacher how to do formative assessment. I can't teach a teacher to work with others and be flexible and love a kid. And so our hiring process has kind of changed. But just seeing that now the institutions value the stuff that I never even learned going into teaching. And again, apologies to Saginaw Valley, but in 15 weeks of the course I'm teaching, which is on socioeconomics and demographics and building relationships and culture and climate, parent-teacher conferences, someone mentioned it earlier, how to talk to or get along with a parent that doesn't look like you, and you've never really had experience with people that don't look like you. How to not hide behind a keyboard and build relationships with people that have accents or talk differently than you. Those are the discussions I've had in this class. We have yet to finish the material each week because they are so wide-eyed, optimistic, can't wait to learn about what it's like to the real stuff, the absolute nuts and bolts of what it's like to survive teaching. That has been a real transformative experience for me, because they're not just playing with their phones while I'm talking. They're absolutely asking questions, and they're the group that just keeps asking. And I've had that now for 3 semesters. So
I really applaud all of this transition to more of the real that you're doing in your courses at all the universities. I really appreciate that.
I just want to go back to what Blake said about the cost of student teaching, the cost of internships as they're called, and I couldn't agree more. With that being said, I also want to state something about the differences in just contract languages in general in public schools. So I would love for us to be able to come up with some consistent, something that we're not starting all of our students out in debt and having them work that first student teaching experience 40, 50, 60 plus hours where it's costing them so much money, because I think that that's definitely hindered. But back to the collaboration on partnerships with school districts and the higher ups, post-secondary. Time is priceless. I think Gail kind of said that to us already. Time is such a resource that just none of us have. So in a small rural district, we do our mentoring programs. We have each teacher has a mentor, and then for programs like Fast Tracks with SBSU, their Fast Track mentor comes in. But I guess that question has me thinking outside of the box. We also do our monthly mentor meetings. It would be a phenomenal opportunity, because the more hands in the pot, the more resources to go to, the more networks we have, the more connection we have for what's needed here to the next level here, will only benefit all of us. I think that would be a phenomenal opportunity to bring more time, that priceless resource, into the picture with a better understanding of both institutions, to make it a lot easier for lack of a better word, what some of our students say, they're hoop jumping the requirements for this place and that place, where it would be a consistent process in place with consistent communication and a little more valued experience. So it just didn't feel like something else to do when the mentor come in or the student teacher coordinator come in, that we'd all be working together. So I think that was a great question.
So I think that we need to start thinking against our traditional programs. Just to give two examples that are out there, KRESA partners with Grand Canyon University on their non-traditional students. They have their paras, their support staff that can get scholarship through their foundation to take classes at Grand Canyon online and get their teaching certificate and then work for KRESA. Western Governors University has been out there talking to districts across Michigan about their program. And if like we have a para that's in it right now, and we're actually getting paid as a district to pay them from their financial aid package. So they're actually making a little more money that can help offset that tuition. So it's those sort of programs, especially for non-traditional students, some older, especially some of our employees that are support that would love to be teachers that can't go to a university, that can't do the traditional path. We don't really have any options in Michigan for that. We have to go outside to some of these other organizations. And I realize that your unions in college are going to balk at doing some of these programs, but if they don't, they're going to end up unemployed. So there have to be some other options for our non-traditional teachers.
Yeah, maybe speaking to Blake's point a bit and building on what Mark was commenting on as well. Darcy's suggestions in the chat box speak to how do we support students who, in the cases that Blake's referencing, return to teaching. And at Oakland, we really struggle with the balance that Darcy's referencing of meaningful clinical experiences, content, and the high leverage practices, because we want to build a pathway that sustains that learner through their career, not simply putting a body there and taking a few online classes. And so we developed a program, experimental program in special ed, where it's an after degree program, and we're looking at embedding those in communities and having it as a residency model for initial cert at the special ed level, because we believe at Oakland, and I think I'm in good company here, that the Grand Canyons and the Western governors of the world put things online, and it might get you through a finish line of a certificate, but I don't believe it'll in long-term basis sustain that person in their career. So what Mark was talking about, for example, one of the high leverage practices of building respectful relationships, you don't do that, I believe, meaningfully online from a distance. You do it with meaningful connections in the community where you're sharing the path and progress along that trajectory. And so I think Blake is challenging us, rightfully so, to find ways to be creative and engage with high quality programs, which all of us on this call have, right? Like, so we're trying here at Oakland, we really are. Mike Van Camp is trying to keep us as honest as humanly possible in that regard, but it's tough in the trajectory of approving something over a period of a year in our own governance structure. So we have to do a better job. I totally hear that. But I don't believe short-term or, decontextualized fixes are going to do anyone any good in the long term. We're just going to continue to spin our wheels if we don't embrace the standards that are put forth from MDE relative to the meaningfully rich clinical practices, deep and rich content knowledge, and high leverage or core practices. So sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. It's frustrating, but I hear you all and I appreciate what you're inviting us to have the result to continue working on.
And I do want to get on something that Mark talked about. If we can get people that love kids and that are learners and that can be creative and problem solve, we can teach them the pedagogy. We can't teach them to love kids. And I'll be honest, we've had some people from Western Governors or Grand Canyon that are good teachers because they have the right mindset. We do have to support them a lot more in learning the pedagogy than if they went through a traditional program. But we just don't have bodies. We are in crisis mode. And if we don't have help from our universities to help get us out of crisis mode, it's going to be bad for kids. So maybe it is where the universities are supporting more once we're hiring teachers in place, even if they don't have all that skill that we would want them to have. But that's a reality. Give me a teacher that loves kids and wants to learn, and I don't care where they went to school, I can make them successful.
So I just want to follow up on what both Mike and Blake said. So we've been investing, partly because it's, I care deeply about community teachers. And also because I believe that, and so we have a couple of residency initiatives going on this year for the first time, where there's lots of similarities to our regular program, but has additional kinds of expectations on the part of both the district and us, and where those who finish the program successfully are guaranteed a teaching job in that district. And we're learning a lot from that initiative this year. I also think that is another way to think about how do we find individuals in the communities themselves who really love kids and would like to find their way toward a career in teaching that we might not in traditional ways be able to identify otherwise, but by having a residency initiative and having people who are committed to the districts and having people in the community sort of interacting with them, we can identify those folks. And I think, Blake, you're right in, you can be a pretty smart person and know your content, and you wouldn't want them close to one of your kids, right? Or you could have somebody whose content knowledge or their content knowledge for teaching might not be as strong as some others who could grow into that. But the problem with all of this, I think, there are lots of issues. The problem with all of this is that it doesn't stop with the time that we recommend somebody for certification. Critical period is when they officially leave us and are in the district, which is why this idea about bringing the district partners and universities closer together to support teachers. We all talk about induction, but I think most universities anyway, and I'll be quite honest and speak for MSU, unless we have funding for something like that, it tends to fall to the bottom of the pile because it's really hard to do everything you need to do to prepare a teacher and then support them once they're gone, except through programs you have that they can voluntarily participate in, or unless you have a relationship with a district and they want to work with you on this together. So I'm not saying anything new. I'm just saying that it feels like we are the recruitment piece we're really working hard at, and there's some clear avenues for. I think the retention piece, particularly around those early years, and not anymore around the early years. I mean, mid-career and later career, particularly these days, a lot of educators are just very fragile because it's not what they expected. And so I think this partnership, if we could think out of the box about how we might support them in an ongoing way. And I know that there are, I'm not saying, I know it sounds like a gross overgeneralization, and it is, because I know that individually we are doing things, but collectively, I think we're not addressing the problem at scale, and that needs to be addressed. So I'll get off my box now.
I agree about the community growing your own. Somebody talked earlier about the grow your own programs. Our middle school principal, so I can just brag about her. I can't really explain everything, but she got that Future Teachers grant, and she now has 26 kids in her middle school that have formed a course where they are partnering with local, they're partnering with Saginaw Valley, and they're partnering with a couple of the career prep centers. And they've matched the cohort to the demographics of our area, which I'm sure most of you agree, demographics of adults don't match the demographics of kids in schools. So they've been able to match it with all the demographics except gender, because evidently middle school boys still want to be football players and cowboys. They don't want to be teachers yet. So it's awesome to see students of color that want to be teachers. They got them matching shirts. They made a chant. It's really fun to watch. So Vicki Wanamaker over at our middle school at White Pine has been doing a great job with that. And then one last community, we had a parent that left our school a couple years ago. Her youngest finished. She had an expired teaching certificate from like 2013 or 14. She enjoyed the environment and the way we prep teachers and all of that so much that she finished the Welcome Back program last month, and she's back working as a full-time sub right now, with the hope that she'll be a teacher in our district at some point in the future. So I do agree totally with that feeling of growing your own, growing community teachers. And then even if they do go to Western Governors, you know who they are, they're part of the fabric of your community, and then they can come back and teach.
So, and I'll say on behalf of K-12 districts, we also need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to use our general fund for these types of programs. And that's just something that I've believed in and have done. But I would also say it would be great for the university to be able to come and say, here is a program for non-traditional students. This is what it's going to cost. Are we willing to do it? We all have these ESSERS funds for the next couple of years. This is a time period to start these types of programs. And I'll be honest, once you do it for a couple of years and realize like we've got some great teachers from our program of Western Michigan, that's going to go into perpetuity when I leave, because it's well worth the money, especially during this time period. So we have a unique window to tell K-12s, here are programs, you've got money, you need people, let's work together on it.
Dee, do you want to say I think you have a really good comment in there, which I did want us to talk about, because I know we're interested in talking about using student teachers to fill classrooms, and then the paying of student teachers and substitutes and
Yeah. I just don't want to capitalize on the conversation here, but yeah, there has to be a solution somehow, some way that we can brainstorm two problems that actually come together. We could provide opportunities for experience, whether that's pairs or substitute teachers, with our candidates that are qualified to do that already, and they need the internship program. So I'm going to go, I love you, Jennifer, I love CMU, but I'm going to speak about SVSU for 1 second on a positive note as well. So SVSU runs that fast track program. We've worked with candidates there for a couple of years now. and they provide an on-site mentor for their candidate, and they provide the workload for the student teacher, who is our teacher. That creates a lot, it's a lot on their plate their first year. So we also provide them a mentor. So they have 2 for sure mentors in the program going back and forth, but they are getting paid for their student teaching for this full year. And our district credits them for 1 step in our contract. If they then stay with us, they don't have to start on our step 0. They will start on step 1. So they're coming in with a little extra there incentive to stay at Farwell schools. There has to be, we have 2 problems that can work together for a solution. I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but the internship, the student teaching, if I have a student in my building, student teaching, it's the best interview I ever have the opportunity to experience with that candidate. I really don't need to sit down with them and go through the formal process of an interview. We do, you know, by law, and follow our protocols and policies. I just had them in my building for 16 weeks. Now, we also offer them as much opportunity, depending on where they're coming from, to do the substitute teaching. So they're receiving pay during that time frame, but there's such limitations there, depending on the institution that we're working with. And I feel bad when they get to week 10 and they're doing a free job for me. Sometimes a phenomenal free job for our building and our students. And the person next door might be high paid veteran teacher per contract, making a lot of money for doing the same thing. So our mentor is still there. If they go from 1 day of non-paid to the very first day of the next school year in a contract that is paid. And I'm still asking for substitute teachers and parapros because I'm short in classrooms. There's got to be something there to come together that we could figure out how to make that work. Can I go one more thing? I know this is going to be a little off topic. I just need to throw this out for everybody to hear. PA 267, that was a waiver that allowed our retirees to teach during the COVID learning plan era of last year. Well, that learning plan error that we had to have in place is gone. So with that went the waiver. So I'm going to give you a real quick story. I have a teacher that retired last year. She was taught part-time in our building for 2 hours, full-time in our district. So we hired her on under that PA 267. And with that, she was hired on for this school year. So November 19th, I received a memo from the Michigan Department of Education that she will be done with us in 11 weeks or she will lose her pension. We are still in COVID. So please, if you have any political realm here, I am shouting my political 2 cents right now. Maybe one of the most important things I can say here. Why would we not have a waiver for our retirees to continue teaching? COVID is still here and we are struggling, and we have phenomenal teachers that could be helping us out. So that's my soapbox.
Mike, you said you had a list from HR. Have we hit them all?
Well, let me review them for you. I think you have. Actually, Dr. Rice hit them so well, but I numbered them off. 1, pay benefits, pension cuts. He outlined the history on that. People know about it. If they're choosing a program to enter in higher ed, some of the shine's been taken off of going into teaching, right? So it is a lot of promotion. And I'm being redundant, right? No surprises, but we had HR folks say, give us the means to pay more, give us the means to give better benefits again, or not have people pay as much toward their benefits again. We know all this. Number 2 was the internship student teaching piece, and a lot of folks have been talking about that it's a really expensive thing for folks, and they could be maybe have graduated already with a different degree. They're seeing their friends go off and start getting paid, and they're going into student teaching and paying for it. But that's been talked about today. We talked about freeing up school administrators to spend time on high quality evaluations and PD and mentoring and coaching. That's been talked about today. I had reached out to Dr. Fighton and Dr. Davison regarding just after a meeting in Macomb County about, is there a way to find out all the folks that have left our state and are teaching elsewhere that we can attempt to recruit back into the state. Dr. Rice kind of referenced that as well. And maybe instead of going to the universities, we go to the state, and they maybe have received those emails he referenced back, might give us a means to start recruiting back. And I don't know enough to comment on that, but that was interesting to me. They talked about we're focusing on teacher shortages. And I know this is a teacher prep kind of meeting, but this is everywhere in K-12, right? It's the paras, it's the secretaries, it's school administrators, bus drivers, custodians. We know. So when you're talking with the schools, it's not a singular topic. I heard back, if you have MDE on there, tell them just that critical shortage list needs to be completely revised, or maybe don't even just say everyone can come back. We're in a crisis right now, and I know that's being talked about. Once again, I don't know any updates on that, but yeah, you've covered all of it, and I can report back, and feel free to reach out to the counties, because I know they'll appreciate that from you. Can I say one more thing? I'm so sorry. Dr. McDonald, and your comment on the core teaching practices and high leverage teaching practices, I can just say from the student teacher supervisor person hat, it's incredible, right? These are real world things that the highest leverage teaching practices that we can have, we're giving these candidates, not only to do a better job during student teaching, be more prepared for their interviews, but once they are in the field, having those capacities already will create less stress and allow them to have the capacity to attend to those social things, right? Those professional skills, the being on time, the being less stressed, the taking care of the kids. And I think they're great. I mean, it's not mutually exclusive. They work hand in hand. And I can say that the academic folks in both of those universities that I deal with work hard on professional responsibilities and being a whole teacher, not just here's what you do with formative assessment, or here's how you lead a group discussion, or whatever it may be. So I just wanted to reference that back.
I wanted to raise one other thing, because we kind of bounced around it, but the mentoring that we talked about earlier isn't just for the new teachers, it's all the way through. And I think in the past, our accreditation and like that, we were most concerned about our graduates, but how do we work together to support all graduates and throughout their careers and with the districts, and not think of, oh, this is my district or this is their district or like that. I think also what we learned through Woodrow Wilson, and many of us on this call were with it, the power and the mentoring that we did in that was that it was not always in the schools, because it was a safe environment. And they learned from all the other schools where they were placed at. And so it wasn't just coming from one school experience, it was coming from 18 different school district experiences and like that. And they shared common stories and challenges and solutions and ideas with each other. And that happened because we were working across multiple districts and wherever they got hired, and like that across the state and later across the country for some of our mentees that we kept on. And so it's a larger problem, but also a larger solution that there's lots of us that are anxious to help with.
So we're getting close to our time. Do we have any, Sarah, Mark, Mike, Blake, and Dee, anything else you would like us to know or you want to share? I feel like, yeah.
I think I heard Mike Van Camp mention it briefly, and Dr. Rice too, that that retirement piece for a potential new person entering our career path, I think has to be relooked at on a larger scale, because Even if I love kids and I have it, and you can teach me the pedagogy, if I know down the road that there isn't something there called retirement, it's very difficult to ask a very first year teacher. And in our higher ed programs, do we give them now a course on financial planning, because that's what they're going to have to do, setting up an account. And not a lot of our business offices or HR personnel even do that for them, but that's a huge piece. When they get to the end of that rainbow, what would be there for them if they weren't vigilant, you know? And I remember starting out 200 years ago in my career, and the only reason why I knew about an annuity was my dad, when I got my first paycheck of $153, that's how old I am, every 2 weeks. Go to your business manager and set up an annuity. And I'm like, Dad, I don't even know what an annuity is, you know? And he said, well, you go and make an appointment. And he was vigilant, and he then asked, did you do it? Of course. And but I also have a state retirement, and so that's really an important piece, and to teach them about that. And on a state scale, we've got to do something that would attract people. They don't even know what they don't know yet, but down the road they're going to need something, right? Like we all hope for. Anyway, it's bigger. It's a big one.
Yeah. Anyone else? I'm trying to do this, read the chat, keep up. Mark, Blake, D.
I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity. You know, and I was that kid 100 years ago as well, that why would I buy 5 years? I'm going to do this forever. Why would I ever want to shorten my career? And so, yeah, I totally get that. That's something. And if you're 23 years old right now, you're not thinking about annuities. But yeah, to get them that mentorship as well, to say, yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. But I just want to thank everyone for listening and sharing. And I've learned a ton this morning from all of you. I appreciate all the time. Thank you.
No, thank you for being here. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about next, but yeah, go ahead, Dee.
Jennifer, thanks for organizing this and for allowing us to have a platform and to network with everybody. I think we're in a crisis situation in education, in society, honestly. And I think that we all need to pull together, challenge each other, and think outside the box so that we can problem solve and find some success. So thanks for letting me be a part of it personally, but thank you everybody else for joining in. I appreciate the platform and the voice.
We're always here. Can always reach out.
I want to echo that, Jennifer, because I think that the panelists that are here today, we are so grateful for your work all the time. And Mark, it's great to hear that more and more superintendents and principals are teaching at the university to help build those bridges. I would like to encourage you also to reach out to your other colleagues in your districts and encourage them to work with the universities. We would love, all of us on this call, we would love to partner with you, and we need the time and space to talk and make plans. So please encourage your colleagues also to reach out. And again, thank you for what you do every day for kids.
Blake, last words?
Sure, and I'm sorry I had to step away, had an emergency in the building. So no, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to partner. I know we're all in this together, and we're all trying very hard. And we will figure out solutions here and there. And please know that we're always willing to partner.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It was a good conversation. I know, I feel like we could just keep talking. An hour went quickly. Okay, that's going to move us to a break. Now bring on dip day. Yep. Yeah, there's no coincidence that I gained 30 pounds my first year of teaching. Okay, so we're moving to a break as I believe, oh, and then we'll have MDE updates. So thank you again, everybody. Okay, do we have everyone back? 11:31. I think Sean's ready to go. Sean and his team.
Yes, indeed. We've got several team members with us today. We'll go through a quick rundown. You can they can wave to you from their respective cameras. We'll hear from a few people during the course of the updates, but the reminder is all of us are here on the chat. You can send us messages throughout, and we'll be divvied up during the job-alike sessions to several places. But going in sort of alphabetical order by first name, we have Bridget McDowell, our Education Assessment Specialist for all things MTTC. Dana Utterback, our analyst in our preparation unit, who also is sort of all things MOEX and helping with our recommendations. Donna Feeblecorn, familiar face from Lake State, but one of our contractors working on standards and our Ed Prep 101 initiatives. We have Holly Carruthers, also contract with us, working on the Future Proud Michigan Educator campaign and also with some additional standards. Jason Kalmbeck, our education research consultant, leading our efforts with the revised EPI performance score. Jennifer Roble, our manager of our recognition and recruitment unit. Joe Priest, who has been in our team for some time, but is our new manager of the professional growth and retention unit. Kate Boswell Gallagher, our manager of our data and accountability unit. Sarah Kate Levan, our assistant director. And then last but not least, me, Sean Kotke, manager of the educator preparation unit. I think I caught everybody there through going through the list of participants. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'll always remind you to follow us on social media, subscribe to our Educationally Speaking newsletter. We have some quick updates today that go beyond the written updates that we sent out earlier this week. Remember, that's we send that out, put a lot of information into that. But we also know that job-alike time is extremely valuable. So we want to go through some quick updates and highlights here for you. So on the legislative side, go to the next slide, please. We have this package of bills in the Senate on dyslexia between 380 and 383, and they're referenced in the written update. But each of these does something a little bit differently. The first is about professional learning for in-service teachers and for screening. So it's very K-12 focused. The second is about teacher preparation institution approval processes and needing to include curriculum related to dyslexia. 382 has some requirements about teaching dyslexia that we would weave into our literacy coursework. as well as refine that requirement on the diagnosis and remediation of reading disabilities. And 383 is about creating an MDE advisory group, all on dyslexia. All of the bills have had a hearing, at least one in the Senate, and there are some substitute bills coming up that we have provided advice on, particularly in the educator certification space. I feel quite strongly that our new PK3 and 3.6 standards and then the assessment associated with them will address the key concerns related to teacher certification and teacher preparation for dyslexia that are in these bills, so that it would not be a suddenly you have to resubmit all these programs that we've worked very hard on and we've done extensive review of to get approved and launching even as early as this year. So I feel some confidence in that, but take a look at those bills when the substitutes drop. There's another bill introduced in the House for seizure training for teachers, and that's what it is. It's a seizure training, seizure awareness for in-service teachers that would commemorate the department to create standards around that. And that'd be mainly a K-12 professional learning piece, but certainly something that you would like to be aware of from a preparation standpoint. And go to the next slide, please. In the State Aid Act, there were 3 funding lines for MDE that are of interest to you. One of them is providing fee waivers for teachers who have lapsed certificates. So helping with that Welcome Back Proud Michigan Educator program. The second is some LEA grants for tuition fees and permit costs for K-12 employees who are pursuing teacher certification. So, and also for the hands-on experiences of 612 students who are interested in becoming teachers. We are working on grant criteria for this, with projected to have it released in early after the new year. But we'll be able to leverage a lot of existing other funding lines for our future Proud Michigan Educator programs, which Holly will say a little bit about, and be able to devote this $1 million to grants or grow your own programs. Again, these do go to LEAs. That's what's specified in the law, but we'll let you know when this comes out and keep you fully informed through the DARTEP listserv and our other communication channels, so that you can partner with LEAs in your regions on accessing some of these funds. And then the last part in the State Aid Act is an MDE full-time equivalent for educator recruitment and preparation. So that's in things to know. Go on to the next. Holly.
Hello. I'm just going to give a brief update here, and I'm happy to talk about this in other contexts if anyone wants to arrange another time to meet. But I wanted to give you a quick update on the Explorer programming grants and the work that we did last year. So Dr. Rice referred to this earlier. This is specifically within the Future Proud Michigan Educator campaign. We have 4 pathways to teaching. The one that we're working on in the Explorer is the 6th through 12th grade students. So last year we gave out $10,000 LEA grants, 44 of them, to develop some sort of a program to interest students in the educator profession. And ideally, these are in partnership or on track to educator preparation. We were also able to put together a free student curriculum that was aligned to the professional preparation standards that were recently adopted. So if you work with one of your LEA partnerships, you should see some really clear alignment between the content in this curriculum and the content that your teacher candidates need to know inside of your program. The good news is that it's you know, clearly not an all-encompassing experience, and there's a lot of flexibility in how it's delivered and where you could potentially even fit in some of your own coursework inside of this if you wanted to offer a course on site or if you wanted to work on credit articulation. So I can talk with you individually about what that might look like for your institution. But we also developed some professional learning for the school-based teacher educators that will need to work on this course, in particular to unpack what teacher preparation looks like in Michigan right now. What are some fundamental understandings that one might need to know about early learners for teaching? And we really tried hard to make sure that the work that we were doing was targeted at that really early teacher preparation experience. It doesn't refer to writing lesson plans or anything that's inside of those really developed skills. This is a very early look at educational systems and structures and strategies. So we're hoping that with the launch of a second round of grant funding, that we'll see even more participation in those partnerships for recruitment purposes and for grow your own purposes. I know that I think Mike mentioned earlier, he had a really successful grant this year with their middle school in Saginaw, and they've done some really cool, very interesting work, as all of our grantees have, and we'll be able to share more of that information. The reports are coming in as we speak. So if anybody has curiosities or questions, I am happy to talk with you at some point in time about developing more Explore opportunities with your district partners.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Let's go. Then as you heard earlier today, the call for investment, $300 to $500 million over 5 years for teacher recruitment and retention, various things that Dr. Rice spoke about. I'll be in job alikes, and I've had a few people already request a copy of that letter, and I'll be happy to send that out to people individually, collect names during this, and I can send them as a group rather than sending it to the whole listserv. But to people who were here to listen and hear the presentation, so you can see the full breadth of that. I have 2 MTTC reminders for you, really about test preparation and test administration. We have 2 more of our test preparation webinars next week on December 7th and December 8th. At those times, the advanced registration is required, and you just go to the MTTC website for that. And the Pearson View Centers have a mask policy as of December 1st. All test takers must wear a mask while inside one of the Pearson-owned test centers. No mask, no service, no refunds. So a candidate who shows up, protests it, they're not going to be able to test, and they will not get a refund on their tests. Non-Pearson-owned test centers, though, may have different requirements. So like the centers at your campuses and offered by third parties. From our data and accountability unit, a couple of updates, quick updates. I believe Jason is going to speak to these.
Yes, thank you, Sean. So some quick updates that the 2021-22 candidate suite survey was distributed and is now out in the field. So that went out on November 17th, and candidates, their mentors, and supervisors should have received an email invitation inviting them to take the survey via Qualtrics. I did want to take a moment to clarify accountable individuals within MDE for the survey, as it is both Dana and myself working with the surveys at the moment. Dana is taking care of communications with respect to access to the surveys. Questions about rostering or individuals not receiving their links, Dana will be able to help with those tasks. I can help you with data-related questions. I monitor the data in Qualtrics, pull it, analyze it, send out the results to the APIs. You might think of it as Dana arranges for folks to take the survey, and then I come into play after they take the survey. Second bullet there, a note that all APIs have access to a dashboard on Qualtrics where you can see a list of who from your roster has taken the survey so far. If you need help accessing the dashboard, either Dana and I can help get the credentials resent your way. Right now, I am trying to work with Qualtrics to figure out if we can give you an option to export the dashboard data into Excel. I had a few EPIs ask about that in the last week because they were stuck manually copying their data over. I have an export button on my end, but it doesn't appear as if you all get that same option. I'm waiting for an answer from Qualtrics, but in the meantime, if you would like your data dashboard, your dashboard data in Excel and don't want to copy and paste, feel free to shoot me an email. It takes me about maybe 2 minutes or less to get that data tailored for you, so I can easily pull that from the dashboard and send it your way. And so just a reminder, there's my email if you want to get your dashboard data sent over, just drop me a note. Those surveys will close on February 13th, which is a Sunday. And I'll take care of that slide. Next slide, please. And then for the EPI performance score, throughout 2021, you should have received 4 emails from me with data. There was a fall-winter survey in March, April. There was the spring-summer survey in August, the administrator survey in late August, early spring. And then not part of the EPI performance score, but we also sent out the year-out survey for you as well. So if you are missing your data, or if you don't think you received the data, shoot me an email again, and we'll make sure that we get your results over to you. Second bullet here, I sent an email to maybe not everybody at this particular meeting earlier this week, but I did send out a note about an opportunity for programs to provide additional data to MDE about candidate placement. The new performance score, right, includes an indicator called candidate placement diversity, which looks at whether your candidates are placed in a diverse school setting during their final student teaching assignment. If they were placed in a Michigan public school, we have the data for those students. The caveat there is someone, whether the candidate, mentor, or supervisor, would have had to complete a survey. It's sort of on that survey where we asked where individuals were placed for their assignment. We have the school-specific data for those candidates. If no one took the survey, none of those 3 individuals took the survey, or if they were placed in a public school outside Michigan, or if they were placed in a non-public school, we do not have diversity data for their placements, and they will not be included in your score calculation. To be clear, MDE was just going to exclude those 3 subgroups, so EPIs are not penalized if they place a large number of candidates in non-public schools, or if they have partnerships with public schools outside Michigan. However, you may want those students included in your score. That's where the template I sent out earlier this week comes into play. You provide us with the data and I'll make sure that we get it added to your performance score. If you have questions about that template or you need it resent to you directly, again, just shoot me over an email and I'll answer any questions that you might have. And then in early 2022, in February, March, we will carry out a data dump. We're waiting for some finalized data. The educator effectiveness appeals data still needs to come in. Once we get that data in, we will do what we did earlier this spring, where we sent out the data to folks that will all be used as part of the EPI performance score. And that should wrap up DAU's portion of things.
Great, thank you. Wanted to turn it over to Darcy now to give a little shout out about our program revision workshops. So quick little update on that.
Good morning, everyone. We just wanted to remind you, we kind of wrapped up a season or 2 of program revision workshops, and I think that folks have found them to be really beneficial and helpful, but also wanted to invite some feedback. These workshops are they're pretty informal, they're collegial conversations. We invite all the participants who can join each time to share their ideas, share any resources they'd like to. We give feedback, all across programs and from MDE. We hope they're a place where folks feel welcome to bring their questions and their implementation challenges and do some group problem solving. So they're really informal, but hopefully we're finding that helpful too. We have been keeping track and recording all of the notes, and they're shared. I wanted to share that with you today, so the link is in the chat. We haven't scheduled the next round of these. We will start them up again probably in mid-January and have them again once per month, and then we usually host a few more during the months where we have application windows, so November and April and times like that. And Sean, are we doing okay on time as far as inviting some folks to share if they have any, or are we tight?
We're tight. We're over on
We're
time.
tight.
So we gotta get to job alike time.
All right, thanks. So, so again, if there are any other ideas or needs that you all have for program support or other ways that we could support you in this work, I would invite you to just email me and let me know your needs and your thoughts about how we could support you through these program revision workshops or in other ways, and how we might work together. We would love to hear from you and get that kind of feedback and know your needs and know how we can help with that. I'm going to put my email in the chat for that. And I hope to see you all in upcoming revision workshops.
Great, thank you so much. I kept the slide, our basic Q&A slide in here, but I know we do want to go to job alikes and maximize time there. So we can certainly stick around after the meeting to do some Q&A and debrief as you like, as well as within the context of our job alike time. So turn it back to you, Jennifer.
Let's do our report out. So I hope everybody had a good breakout. And let's start with deans and directors.
Okay, I hope it's okay that I do the summary here for our group. I was taking notes. We talked about some great topics, kind of a debrief from the panelists, expressed concerns about low quality accelerated and alt route programs. We all have concerns about low quality, but those in particular, and talking about clinical preparation being so important. We talked about clinical preparation needing to be fully collaborative at all levels, from the beginning to the end, and how valuable that is. As we all get deeper into that, we're seeing more and more importance to that. We talked about needing to check with our institutions about the liabilities of our placement, our student teachers, or if they're hired for a day job or long-term sub position, check to make sure that they have appropriate liability insurance coverage. We also talked related to that about emergency protocols, encouraging for sure student teacher interns, but also early in the program to teach our education students to check with schools about emergency protocols so that they are ready and informed if incidents happen in the classroom. And then we also talked about training, certification training options available through different providers for candidates, either as part of the program or optionally to encourage candidates to seek out those trainings for crisis management and a host of other things. That's my take.
Any questions for deans and directors? I will go ahead and do accreditation. We're pretty short and sweet because I'm sure not everybody wants to hear about all the data talk we talked about. So we talked about Cape Standard 5 as people are writing, and we're just kind of helped each other there with some suggestions on self-study writing. We talked a lot about the MDE surveys and the data that's coming in now and monitoring, making sure we all have access to data dashboards and questions about the new EPI score that we will all be rated with this year, not rated, about, I don't know, I'm not supposed to say rated, but, and then, so this our EPI score that will be provided. And then we talked about just contact information. I think sometimes like some people are missing notifications and making sure we're consistently updating our contact information, especially as people are moving positions so that we don't miss anything. And just a reminder that Gina is hosting an MDE accreditation support network on Monday, December 6th at 3 o'clock. Okay, let's do certification officers.
Okay, I'm not sure who we chose to report out, but I'll step in. And anyone else from my group, please, because I don't think I wrote everything down. So at our breakout session, one of the things that came up, we were discussing the requirements for a school counselor. renewal, specifically the endorsement. And we just, and the response was who we can contact with additional questions as regards to the counseling sketches was Claudia Nichols. We went into talking about some of the benefits for a teacher now that we have the standard certificate. What would be the benefit of the teacher to progressing to the professional certificate? And we discussed about how they could possibly have benefits in terms of moving to another state, things like that. I briefly got distracted, so if I skipped anything, please, anybody else, please jump right in. We talked about MTTC validation. Specifically, we talked about the, I want to say it was the MB endorsement, the physical education, and we don't, there was nothing on the chart that indicates the absolute last time we can accept. I'm not quite clear on that last part because I'm sorry, my phone started ringing. I didn't catch that last part. Can anyone jump in on that one?
This is Bridget. Yeah, the chart that we have that lists when tests were last updated as part of the 5-year validity quick sheet needs to be updated to add the MA and MB endorsements that several people were asking about. And I will take care of that. Sorry for the oversight.
And I think that was it.
Okay, clinical directors.
I took the notes and we had a discussion about program documentation and ways to streamline that, and watermark via came up, and so there was some sharing with that. And then we had quite a bit of a conversation regarding student teachers as interns as long-term subs or hired as teachers during student teaching experience, and that there's grave concerns about this, as even though the districts are promising that mentorship, it often doesn't happen because their own teachers are overworked and are often subbing on their planning periods. And then there's no sharing and reflection and co-planning that's going on. And so there's some valuable parts of the student teaching internship itself that go missing. And so many of those candidates are burning out before they're even hired as teachers after they've graduated. So that was quite a discussion on that. And then there's also a discussion on the problem that people with 60 credit hours can sub. And so we've got this disconnect or imbalance here than when we're telling student teachers, no, you can't sub, and they have twice as many credit hours at most cases, and more expenses because they're not working at the same time, and so on. So one of the things that was brought forward is there were a couple of districts that are looking at taking one of their full-time teachers out of the classroom and having that full-time teacher's only responsibilities being mentoring 3 or 4 student teachers within a building. And then those student teachers could possibly be those full-time subs or long-term subs, but then they have a dedicated mentor, and that's that teacher's only responsibilities. That might be a good place also for some retired teachers as well. But it's getting districts to be able to do that, and coordinating that there's 3 or 4 student teachers within that same building. The other thing that we talked about was liability insurance, in which EPPs are requiring it, how they're requiring it, what companies or providers they're using. And it was also noted that there is an inordinate amount of requests coming into field director inboxes requesting candidates information for hiring and for the long-term positions as well as open positions within the district, and that the EPPs are feeling quite overwhelmed with all of these requests as well. If there's anything that I missed, our other field directors can chime in.
Does anyone have any additional questions in any of the areas, or I figured clinical was going to be an interesting discussion, so based on our partners being here. I know Sean has agreed to do a Q&A and stick around if people have questions for the MDE as well.
Who should we share these notes with?
Send the notes to Susan English.
I just want to say I'm grateful for these meetings, because I think sort of the elephant in the room is we're experiencing at all levels leadership in a time of crisis. You know, we're trying to come up with innovative solutions, meet pressing needs, and with very few resources. Like Gail, when you mentioned the teachers are strapped, administrators and higher ed, 120%. And there are super pressing needs out there. And how do we do this? How do we coordinate this? And so being able to hear these different solutions or different approaches is very much appreciated.
Jennifer, I did have a question. The suggestion about writing a letter that Dr. Rice brought up after it gets publicized a little bit more, is that something that DARTEP would want to do? Is that something that MACD is better poised to do? I just sort of wondered thoughts on that.
And building on that, do we want Michigan Public Education deans, MyPI deans, MACD, and DARTEP to all sign on for these letters? Which I can't imagine that they wouldn't want to. It's just, would that be helpful, Sean, to have those 4 groups sign on to the letter you're going to send us?
Yes to all that. Yeah. And again, let me know if you want to, just individually, if you want to see the letter. I've been sending it out to people individually over the course of the meeting, as I've gotten chat notices and emails, but
can you just send it out?
I'm not going to send it to the whole broad DARTEP listserv, because that is a lot of people who aren't here to have heard it and know the context.
Oops, sorry, that was me. I turned off my thing. One of the things we have done in the past is created. Oh, sorry.
That is popular.
I know. So some of the things we've done in the past is we've done MACD and the deans and the MyPI. We've created a combined one, and I think adding DARTEP to those kinds of letters. And then we've also sent them, but we've also utilized our own legislative liaisons, or whatever title we call them, with our institutions. And so I think probably a good idea maybe would be the leaders of those different groups to coalesce around and have a conversation about the letter, and then share it with everyone who's interested in it being involved. Does that sound like a reasonable next step?
I
wondered too about signatures. Do they have to be wet signatures, or is it a list of institutions? How does that work for the signatory part of that?
In the past, what we did is we had the presidents of the organizations sign, but we could certainly. I haven't organized this in the past, but I'm sure someone else here has, where you have those create a letter and have everyone sign on to it, kind of thing. I don't know which is more effective, and I don't know if it has to be a which. It could be a both and, because different people privilege different things. So if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sean, I'm also wondering if you think it would be a good idea. All of us have articulation agreements with districts, and that if we also compose a letter that is from our university and our partner district, and it would be a lot more work, I know, or some sort of so that they don't think it's just coming from higher ed, but it's coming from higher ed in partnership with our district partners too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we don't want a proposal to the legislature for 300, 500 million, $1 billion to be looked at as, oh, it's a money grab for MDE, or it's a money grab for, and this is the rhetoric out there, all those liberal indoctrination factories at higher ed. That's not going to solve it. So if it's like, no, this is the community saying this is what we need to do, and these are the resources we need to do it, then that's a much more powerful voice.
And that's why I was thinking that I agree that we need to do it from these groups, but we also need to show that we're in partnership and that we're not in isolation. And if it just comes from, and I'm sure the various leadership groups will probably be coming out with superintendents' letters of signing on and like that. But if we also have letters that are going forward that show and document the partnership, I think that sends a different message than we quite often send.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think representing schools of all sizes across the state is important, going back to the idea of rural schools and that they need to be included in this as well.
I think, and they also need to be included purposefully, so it actually is not just the list of all these places, but in the body of the letter. And as we sign them, somehow it looks like these are the major stakeholders in all of this, and we are in partnership, not only in our stance but in our work. So just having the list of all of these doesn't always do that, because that still can convey that, oh, here are all the university people and here are all the K-12 people, for example. But I think there needs to be text in the letter that actually speaks to that. And then the way let's just do it alphabetically, for example.
I want to add to that and build on it a little bit. If it's just a letter and they receive a letter, it's so passive. We have to be prepared to put action behind our words. And so anyone that signs on has to be prepared to go to hearings, to picket in front of the Capitol, to call legislators, to amass groups of educators. I mean, we have the potential to really reach a large number of constituents in these legislators' districts. And we have to be willing to follow through and make that happen. It can't just be a letter.
And that's what the superintendent basically said. We can't be passive. We have to do it. I make a mean hot chocolate and can make several thermoses of it, and we can just, stand outside the Capitol. I'll pass around the paper cups.
Yeah. And several years ago, lots of us that are in this call went to Lansing multiple times around the Garcia bills and like that. And it's that type of showing up and putting the card in to speak to it and like that as they get closer.
And
done some of that work in the past.
For people who are interested to just reach out, because one of the forces in MACD right now and AACTE is we're trying to create the identity of, we want legislators to wonder how we feel about bills. We want to be how did the National Rifle Association become the person that gets the organization that gets checked before someone wants to move forward? How do we get checked? How do we get part of that language? So we have Day on the Hill and these types of things. So if people are interested, I think we can talk about being much more organized here in Michigan and be more strategic broadly, and then have these focused ways if people are interested in that.
It would be a lovely way to come out of the pandemic and these awful recent events and feel like we have some purpose that's targeted and productive.
I'd like to add that we also have just an amazing group of folks on this call, a very talented and committed, dedicated group of folks. And let's make sure that everybody knows that we are a tremendous resource.
I have fulfilled now, I think, every request that's come in via chat as well as email to regarding the letter, and I can tell people will be also sharing it amongst each other. So that's fine. Again, just let me know if you want to see it. Again, as Dr. Rice said, it's right now to leadership. It will eventually, very soon, go to the whole legislature. And so there you go. I don't know exactly when that will go to the whole legislature, but
he also indicated that our letter should be after it goes to the whole. Could you give us a heads up when it goes to the whole group?
Yes, as soon as I know that gets done. Yeah, I will. I'll do so. We didn't know when it actually got presented to the legislature, to the individual legislators, that it was sent to here until after it was. So it took us, I think I got it maybe half a week later. So so yes, we will let you know as soon as we know when it goes.
This gives us time to rally things and start doing some organizing, and then have it ready to go as soon as we kind of get the green light.
Sure.
Beth, do you know if we're going to try to do MACT in the summer yet?
Yeah, well, we were planning on trying to do the retreat. And then also what I was just thinking, and kind of doing a little distracted, but on task, reach out to the group and see about a fall, or having the winter meeting, and thinking about coalescing around considering planning like a day on the Hill. A lot of our other sister states do this intentionally. And but it's really about bringing the legislatures want to talk to the students. They're not interested in talking to us. And so maybe I was going to reach out to the board and see if that was something we would think would be something to plan for maybe later in the winter, early springtime, to try to have a day on the Hill that way, and being intentional. So, but I'm just saying that out loud. Like, I haven't talked to anybody, so people might say it's a terrible idea, but it is something that's consistent with what other sister organizations do across the country. And so, and have found it very useful.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I mean, it's rare enough to have happen among educational groups that they might just sit up and take greater notice if we do it also. And if we can do it in partnership with K-12 institutions, that would be different.
Okay, I feel like we've had some really good discussions. Cindy's called for action. It's good. Thank you, everybody. Any parting words? Okay, well, have a good weekend. Thank you for being here. Thank you for a great conversation.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks so much. Great to see you all.
Great to see you. Stay safe.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Be well.